So to me, that big question is like,
Oh,
what's the overall goal to work towards? And then that kind of determines how to focus on some of those other questions.
Sorry, folks, I totally lost track of time. Looks like you started without me, which is great. And we missed the first 14 minutes of recording, but now we're recording, and my sincerest apologies and carry on.
mostly we were reading the documents, Mary Beth. So
Okay.
those those will be available. We're allowed to share them.
Okay.
Chuck, that was a really helpful summary of those, was it three main categories? Could you just repeat those again? I think maybe for the recording it would be useful to have them.
Sure. Yeah, the three most useful categories for level two, in my view, are at least for publicly funding of level two, are multifamily, since it's difficult to get those installed without some kind of financial support. And that opens up the benefits of EVs to residents in apartments and rental units and things like that. Um, Tourism, by putting it in at lodging so that people who drive EVs have a place to charge while they're visiting the state and have at their overnight accommodations. And then the third focus is that level two charging is better for the electrical grid. It's less of a load compared to DC fast charging. And especially if you do it during the day at workplaces, there's an extra capacity on the grid at those times. Tends to be cleaner energy because a lot of it's being produced from solar. So there's a lot of benefits to level two charging for the electrical grid too, which given data centers and everything else that's happening, there's a lot of conversation about that right now.
I guess I might add a third category, which I experienced myself when I was trying to get up to Maine and I didn't have enough charge to get where I wanted to go. Um, the high-speed charger station that I planned on stopping wasn't working, so I was forced to go to a level two. And I went to Freeport, a shopping area in a community, and it was I needed somewhere that I could spend 3 hours and be occupied, entertained, or so it was free charging that they offered at their level two charging stations. But I went to the LLB outlet and spent $250. So um, it actually is a really good draw for the economy. Even if you're not charging for the electricity, I think the community can come out ahead.
I think one thing I'm really interested to know is, like, speaking from your roles as energy committee members, what would it take within your community to get a level two charger installed? So in terms of a funding level, technical assistance, vendor lists, like what would you need to actually make this happen in your community?
We tried this in Windham. Looked like it was going to cost about $50,000 for the town to put level two charging in to a local shopping area. The town had no appetite to spend any money on this. We considered going to the businesses and seeing if they would be interested in pooling their money, but that seemed like more effort than it was worth since the town wasn't going to contribute to it anyway. So I think, strong financial help would be the one thing that would help a town like Windham get interested in it.
So, John, I actually have a comment about a gripe with what you just said. Not with you, but with what you just said, which is something I've heard a lot, and it's what I think is a big challenge that I don't know why it exists. A level two charger costs $500, right? Like that's what it costs. The expensive ones cost $600. Of course, commercial installations, it's slightly different. You have the maintenance aspect. You have to get special code. You have to meet special code in certain cases. It's the installation cost that has been ridiculous to me. Every time we've seen these projects, I just never understood where it's coming from. There are licensing fees sometimes, so I know that if you need to give access to, for example, the town to be able to charge specific rates, and the online application basically there's cost to that. But it sounds like the average to install a level 2 charger is something like $20,000, which is 2 orders of magnitude bigger than the cost of a level 2 charger. So one thing that obviously we're not going to solve this, right? We're not going to be able to change the market and what convince electricians to not charge as much or whoever's installing them. But I think that we could think about, well, what is it actually trying to solve, and is there a reason we can't go cheaper? So one option that um, Sam Evans Brown had suggested a long time ago is, well, we're talking about level 2 chargers. What about level 1 chargers? Right? Like for it seems silly because you charge at much lower rates, but are we solving the right problems? The problem that you brought up of having destination chargers for tourism, yeah, that requires level 2 chargers, maybe even level 3 chargers. But apartment complexes, right?
Yeah.
Like imagine a parking lot. So in a parking lot, for every level 2 charger, that's let's say on average 7 kilowatts at 240 volts, you could probably install, at 120, that's like 7 level ones, right? Roughly divided by 7, 1.2 kilowatts for a level 1. Um, is that an option that we're exploring, right? Like the costs I know are significantly lower for a level 1. There's no need to upsize the panels usually. The wiring is cheaper. Yes, it's slower charging, but have we tried it? So I would love to see an apartment building in one of the larger towns. Obviously, in my town, we don't even have apartment buildings, but I would love to see that, right? Like, oh, a town in Nashua, uh, an apartment building in Nashua put in 40 level 1 chargers because there's an unusually high number of residents that need charging, and it's free charging, right? Because it's such a low load that it's just free. Does that help? Let's look at the cost. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting. And I'm also just rambling because I get so upset every time I hear the cost of a level 2 charger
No,
installed.
I agree for the housing solution.
Yeah.
Like subsidizing that is a little difficult in my mind because some housing group is going to benefit, but most won't unless you do it very cheaply. And then maybe you can do a lot more. And the level one would, I mean, level one does work for a lot of people. And for those people that it didn't work, at least it could get them charged to where they could get to their level three charging.
Yeah.
They wouldn't get stuck.
Exactly. And it could just be a start too, because you don't have to solve for everybody. If you're solving for a majority where, overnight a level 1 will give you over 10 hours, that's 15 kilowatt hours, right? Well, 12 hours because it's overnight. So let's say it gives you 15, 20 kilowatt hours. That's about 30% on a Model Y, right? That's a pretty decent amount. That's 100 miles. um, you solve for those cases, and then you have residents that maybe are upset because it's not enough for them, but you've already proved out that there's benefits in having EV charging on site, and then maybe it's easier to install level 2. Maybe by then it's not as expensive to install level 2 because the infrastructure might be there, or it might be easier to install level 2. It won't cost $20,000. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
Patsy raised her hand.
Yeah, I don't, if you haven't heard from me before, I live in a town with like 700 people. It's very small. We don't have any commercial anything. We have a library and a town hall. But, we've talked about getting a electric police car, and I don't know, are these kinds of funds that could be provided if a town wanted to get an electric police car or other electric vehicles, that this fund could be used for that kind of a issue?
There is a different pot of money available right now, Patsy, if they want to switch out an existing vehicle for a newer electric vehicle.
But I
Uh,
mean, for the charger, like it would just, it might just help people say, oh yeah, we'll get a free charger if we get a police vehicle or something like that. I don't know, just an idea.
Yep. Do you think in your town, Patsy, given that it's so small, but there are a lot of New Hampshire communities that are that small, if, say, the funding level were high enough, would your community be interested in one at the library or the town hall?
Possibly. It would have to be put in a place where it wasn't conspicuous because everybody's like, we fight over like the flag not having a light shining on it at night. And, some people don't even want lights near the library. So, I think it's something we would talk about. And I think we almost got an electric police vehicle, but it just wasn't good timing a couple years ago. So I'm just thinking that, in a year or two, when we need another police vehicle, and, it might go through. I don't know. But we have a kind of a 2/3 people want to do energy projects and 1/3 don't. So we have lots of really nice, very civil, wonderful discussions at town meeting. It's pretty amazing.
So Susan and then Catherine?
Catherine, you were first, I think.
Okay.
Well, you show first in the line, but I'll go ahead.
Oh, okay.
So Sandwich population of about 1,600. The town did not want to get an EV charger. We wanted to encourage the few businesses in town to look into it. So the one restaurant that we have had become part of a grant that fell through. So they are not going to put it in now that the grant fell through. So, and that was the biggest business in town. So that's where that stands. And then at the library, which is near the center of town, we're kind of looking into it. But again, we have the same people don't want to see the EV charger because it's in a historic district. It's all a lot of education or convincing, I guess. I don't know. Some people want it. It could also be used by town vehicles. We're looking at level 2 at the moment is what we've talked about all along, but that's where our town stands.
And potentially that same, was it a restaurant?
Yes.
Was it, yeah, would be interested in installing a level 2 if the funding was available?
If the funding was available, yes.
So for, I don't know if this is a too prejudicial kind of a question, but to allow the level 1 at housing for people who haven't been able to afford an EV or haven't that, to encourage them to get one. Is there any kind of documentation of whether those populations want one, know about them, would invest in it versus giving it to more moneyed groups that want to make sure their customers are happy with a fast charger?
Can you rephrase the question? I don't think I understood.
Uh, well, in terms of environmental justice, to put in those level 1 chargers that more people could use at some housing facility, assuming that's population where less people are able to invest in an EV, but this may make the difference for them and they would do it. Is there any kind of demographic information? Is that population interested in an EV? Would that be too big a step to replace whatever they have now for an EV? So that theoretically it's a great idea, but in actuality it would not be used as much as putting in an EV charger someplace for people with more means, like a ski resort or a restaurant, where it would have to be a fast charger because you've got, people waiting in line for their turn. And that's economically discriminatory.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer. But it's interesting for sure, right? Like if we could answer it, then I think we'd have a lot of use cases crop up because yeah, like if you can make the argument that just adding level 1 chargers for very low cost drives populations to getting EVs, that's a big deal. that's why I was saying an experiment would be incredible. I don't know how if this has been done, and there are different ways of doing it. We're talking about level one chargers, but something to remember about level one chargers is that that's equivalent to just plugging it into a wall. So we say level one chargers, but we really could be talking about just putting literally outlets, regular outlets by uh, a car spot. And then a lot of cars today bring their own plug-in chargers, or the residents themselves could buy it, right? So it's not so much that, oh, we're spending funding on people that are getting EVs. It's just we're doing infrastructure upgrades. We're putting outlets. And then people now have the option of bringing their own chargers. They have to spend their own money to put in a charger. But of course, the electricity is free because it's just an outlet. And then there are other benefits to it, but yeah, that's a really interesting question.
I almost wonder, Zeke, if in those situations it might be worth in the context of this grant, considering the low power level twos rather than the level one in multifamily housing situations. I don't know.
From a cost perspective, I don't know that it would make a difference. I think you're still looking at $20,000 per charger. Because a majority of the cost from what I've seen comes from you're running large enough conduit for large cables, right? Because you need to carry the 240 volt load. So usually number eights are thick enough that you wouldn't run it just on the ground. So you need the conduit, you need the cable, you need to upgrade the panel because you can't have more than one per circuit. So a lot of times you'll need a sub panel, and then it usually also means that you need to upgrade the service. So that's, I think, where the cost starts to drive up pretty substantially. As opposed to the level one, the companies that are doing level one charging, they do very smart um, circuitry where you can feed a lot of them from a single circuit, for example. They'll just do load management, right? So it doesn't cost as much to install, and it doesn't require as much infrastructure upgrade. Um, but yes, the what you said about like a lower power charger, not necessarily lower power charger, but doing load management is another avenue I've seen people try to take, right? Where you have four chargers, but realistically it's one. It's just that they do load management. So if there's only one car, you're charging at full capacity. If there's four, it just downgrades to having the equivalent of a fourth of the charge power. So yes, that's something else we should definitely consider.
Chuck, did you want to say something? You're on mute, Chuck.
Sorry, about this level one question. The challenge with level one, like it sounds like it should make a lot of sense, but because you're getting so little power, you basically need to use it every night. So you need one charger for every person that has an EV. And if you take the example, somebody mentioned like 40 level one chargers at an apartment complex. If you do the math on that, 40 level one chargers means 800 amps of service capacity, which no building has. So you're still talking about a service upgrade. You still have 40 chargers. There's still a lot of infrastructure costs that go into that. There are trade-offs on anything, and a lot of the cost from that is the infrastructure costs. And you think about either running conduit through a parking garage to every parking space, or having to dig trenches and put in conduit and put in pedestals for every parking space. That's where those costs start to add up. Um, I think level one is a very specific use case. And I think it also comes back to Susan's question about economic justice. There are some studies out there that lower income people tend to drive further distances per day compared to higher income people. They tend to have longer commutes, which means they need more energy to drive an EV compared to those who are not driving as far. So that's one of the tricky parts about this too. And I don't know that there are really, any studies about the availability of charging with people getting EVs, because we're only just starting to get to that point in the market where there are low cost used EVs available that are capable of replacing all the functions of a vehicle. We've had low cost Nissan Leafs and like old used things like that. But if they only get 70 miles, that can't be a family's only vehicle. So I think this is a question that will be started to be answered in the next maybe, 2 or 3 years, because we're just getting to that point right now where we've got used EVs that are just as capable as a gas car that are coming off of lease and are available for low cost used buyers. So I think it's a little too soon to really know the impact of that uh, at this point.
Brian, looks like you've got your hand up.
I'll keep this quick because I think Beth and John might have had their hands up first, but I just wanted to give like a little bit of context for first. So I've got an electric Mini Cooper. It's only got like 115 miles of range, but I charge on a level one as my standard. I don't have a level two at home. And I'm only getting every night about 10 to 11 kilowatt hours. So I'm only getting, and I get, 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So I'm getting maybe 40 miles a day on my charges. So I mean, I'm charging most days, right? I've got about a 4 mile commute to and from work. And I do that a couple times a day. And I'm usually remote a couple days a week. So I can make it work because I don't have a super long commute. And, I'm not lugging any kids around to sports practice or anything like that. But I mean, I like the idea, Zeke, of trying to find a good low cost way to just get more charging out there. Because if someone else is in a similar boat to me, then this would work, right? And residential, in my mind, is like where the biggest area of opportunity is, right? Travel might be a secondary thing, but like, how do we get these into more either whether it's public lots, like in Keene, we have a bunch of public lots that are near our apartment buildings. That's where I'd love to see them, but residential in general. So I just wanted to kind of give that little context. I was just trying to look it up on my phone, get my history here. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I totally agree. And just think about if you had level one charging also available at your job, right? Like that solves the problem. So, and it's what we're seeing in Europe where they're putting little chargers just all over the place. I think that was kind of where I was heading. It's not the solution. It's just the beginning of a potential direction to just kind of get momentum. Like the level two seem perfect if you can own it, if you have a garage, if you have your own house. But everyone else, I don't think we're ever going to see 40 level two chargers in an apartment building. That's ridiculous. That's that's just it's way too much power. But the level ones make total sense. So just having them all over the place. And especially so I have my in-laws live in Miami and in an apartment. And if you've ever been to Miami, it's like 80% Teslas. And even the apartment building, which is a very old building, they must have, I don't know, 200 cars. They have a ton of electric cars. And I've asked them, like, how do these people do it? Because there's no charging, there's not even outlets in the building. And they all just go to level three chargers like they would go to gas stations because there's a lot of free level three charging in Miami for some weird reason. Um, but yeah, you have level one chargers. If we started doing that and we had apartment buildings all over New Hampshire, for example, that had them, and you have people that are, they have, you create that thirst, right, for more. Like they'll get the electric car because they know they can if it fits their needs. And then we start to see more level threes or businesses that have it for their own employees. I don't know. It's such an exciting adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I know it was Beth and then John.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for doing this. I'm really interested in this space, and I want to say a special hello to Chuck, who I used to work with. Just a perspective from someone who's driven both a plug-in hybrid, and now we are fully electric. We don't have a gas car. When I was driving a plug-in hybrid, I would consider myself a sipper. Anywhere there was a parking place where there was something interesting and there was an EV charger, level two, I would stop. It is a great way to pull in people into towns and places where there's something to do. Now that I have two EVs, we travel, around the state a lot, through the state to Maine, to Vermont, to New York, to the Adirondacks. I can get to the Adirondacks without charging. I don't need a level three charger in New Hampshire if I live here. I charge at my house whenever I need it. And rarely do I charge every night. So that's at level two. I charge it at home. Like we have two cars. We're charging our car probably every third night. And we have commutes, or one of us has a commute. I'm retired now, so I don't have a commute anymore. But I think the reality is that a level one is fine for somebody who has a plug-in hybrid. But as Chuck said, a couple of level twos will do the same work for you as a lot more level ones in an apartment complex. Um, but the place for a level two is wonderful to bring people into a downtown area or to an attraction, and certainly at a place where there's overnight staying, an inn or a bed and breakfast or something like that. I'm excited to see this go. This money's been hanging around for a long time. It needs to get spent.
Yeah. So I guess now that I'm kind of synced up with the meeting, sorry, I joined late and then started talking right away. But I would think that for Windham, the most useful place to put these funds would be for level two chargers in our little shopping areas. Um, Most of them are just a mile off of Route 93. We could attract traffic, on that was traveling longer distances where people decided they needed to charge for, 2 hours and they could go to a restaurant and do a little shopping in town. Um, I had one concern. So one of you mentioned the level one charging option in apartment building could distribute the load. So maybe instead of getting a full level one charging experience, you're getting a sixth of it. I had I cringed when I heard that because I've got a level two charger in my house. I know when I plug in how much charge I'm going to have the next morning, and I rely on that. I plan my day and my trip on that. And if I plugged into a level one charge and thought I was going to get 40 miles worth of charge overnight, and I came down the next morning and I had 10 miles of charge, would, I'm afraid that that could change people's perspective on the reliability of electric transportation in general. So anyway, I know we don't have control over that, but I would hesitate in drawing down the expected level of charge in the interest of saving money because we don't want to give EV travel a bad name. The fossil fuel industry does a lot of work trying to do that. We need to make the experience as reliable and consistent as we can. Anyway, thanks.
Susan? Oh, you're on mute.
So you may already know about this, but David Waters and others have put forward a bill or are putting forward a bill that any person with a storefront can put in an EV charger there or at the um, light pole. Melissa, do you know more about that? And I don't know if that has an impact here that would sprinkle EV chargers more through a municipal area. And, highways have been the death of downtown. If suddenly that's where your EV chargers are, there could be a reverse of that. But that's nothing worth hanging your hopes on for this year. Just an FYI.
Right. The problem with light post chargers is regulatory, right? Utilities are monopolies, and they're the only ones that could install light post chargers, and they are not allowed to sell direct to customers. So that's what's been stopping in all of ISO New England the emergence of light post EV chargers.
Well, then how do we change that?
We talked to Sam Evans Brown. We tell him to get his group going.
David Waters must know that. He must have a plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also just an urgency matter. There are so many other important topics and things that have been going on. Adding level one chargers to light posts where the utilities would be the ones benefiting to a degree where utilities today are not necessarily the good guys. I don't know. It's been I think it's a difficult battle. It's an important one, but it might not be the right time for it.
Interesting. And right. And if it's governed by ISO New England, it means It's not just a New Hampshire issue. We need to get all 6 states to work on it.
Yeah.
6 New England states. Yeah.
Yeah, it might even be a problem for all the grids in the US, to be honest, because of how we do monopolies. Um, I don't know. It'd be an interesting thing to look to research as well.
Yeah, I tried to look real quickly now and was not successful.
I just want to ask really quick, I'd love to hear your thoughts on funding allocation throughout the state. Should the $3 million be allocated by county? Should more populated areas receive more funding? What are your thoughts?
Well, economic justice areas were defined for IRA, so that kind of identification is probably available. So find a trailer park.
What's the goal, Melissa? Like one thing I would hate to see is for us to identify like the best places to put it to be, equitable and find the right people that need the money for something like this, but then have that be the lowest usage, for example, right? Because unused level 2 chargers are such a demotivating site.
So the goal today is just to get your thoughts. I agree, like many of my communities up north, if we were to you be able to use that economic justice indicator as maybe, qualifying for more funding, additional points in the scoring system, we would get a lot of points. But is that the best place for us to be putting chargers? The tiny town of Stratford has a level 2 charger, and it's rarely used. So I don't know.
Is it at a library or some other well-trafficked place? Shopping center?
It is on their main thoroughfare. Yep.
That's the thing. As some like I own power hungry EVs. I don't think I would ever go to a level 2 charger in the center of a town unless I was in John's position where I had to or it was a destination. It's you charge at home or you need a level 3 because you're on a road trip. So that's been my observation with the level 2s. But there are places. So to answer your question, Melissa, my vote would be hotels and auto body shops that work on EVs. Those are the two places I've heard the most. It's like, oh, well, if we had a level 2 charger, we would be able to use it basically nonstop. The auto body shop is one it's an interesting one because in Massachusetts, the utilities will subsidize up to 4 level 3 chargers for auto body shops, which is really interesting. Just because, if they're willing to work on EVs, why wouldn't you make it easier for them to be able to charge their customers' cars? Of course, it's business, so it's private versus public. So I don't know how the funding works for that, but I think that would be a good efficient use of charging infrastructure.
John, I can't remember who had their hand up first, but let's do John and then
Oh,
Beth.
I think we did it at the same time. Um, let's see. So would this be funding to do the whole installation, or would there be a partnership between like businesses in a shopping area um, could get help where they would chip in some and the state would chip in some?
It's not written yet, John.
So are that some of the kind of things we could tell you that it's,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, don't just say we're going to get half the money, we have to raise the other half because that'll never happen kind of thing?
Yeah. What funding level would actually incentivize your community to move forward with this, with
Okay.
installing a charger?
Sorry,
Yeah,
Beth, I
'cause
answered it.
yeah, I'd like to ask Chuck, is he still here? If he could give us a sense of what the actual costs of level 2 charging stations in New Hampshire have been in the past.
I was going to
This,
jump in after
yeah.
you had made your comment anyway, so thanks. Yeah, I think, with level two kind of on the low end, you're looking at probably about $10,000 a port when you're looking at the cost of the hardware, the software to operate it, the warranty, and all of the installation, including any site work you have to do, like digging a trench, putting in conduit, wiring a new service, things like that. 10,000 is probably kind of the low end if we're talking about putting in multiple chargers. If you have an extra 40 amps available and you've got a wall right next to your electrical panel, obviously that's not going to cost $10,000. But if we're talking like a commercial new site, 10,000 is probably the low end. On the high end, if there's a lot of site work involved, it can go up to $25,000 a port. It also really varies. I've seen funding programs that are not designed super well to be cost effective. They'll put in, things like the BABA requirements, Buy America compliant, certain speed requirements, and all of those things make it more and more expensive. So it can go above that if the program is not designed with that in mind. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. But in terms of like how much funding is needed, I think from our experience, there a lot of the grant programs want the recipient to put in some money so it's not 100% funded, which means it's really hard to find the people that need it don't have that extra 20% or 25% of the project to pay themselves. So it ends up being a giveaway to people that is just like it makes it a little easier for them to do the project, but they probably would have done it already. They can make money off of charging, the finances kind of work for them, and the grant just kind of helps make it happen in a lot of cases. Um, so it needs to be smartly designed to fit the use case. If it's designed for lodging and hotels to put it in, you actually need a higher power level two because people who are traveling tend to arrive with lower batteries and not spend as much time parked overnight compared to someone who's at home, or in like in a multifamily scenario. So multifamily, you can go power shared level twos, equivalent to kind of like a level one, um, power level, even though it's level two, that'll work better for that scenario. If you're talking downtown to support businesses, again, if you've got a small downtown and you're requiring 4 chargers to get funding, a lot of times that doesn't make sense. Two might be the right amount for the size of the town. So it really depends. Like that's where a lot of these questions kind of interplay, like what the goals of the program are and what requirements to put in terms of power levels and other restrictions and things on the software like that. It's very hard to design a good program that meets all of the needs. And there are lots of examples of people trying, and it takes a lot of thought and effort and time, and there's a lot of different ways it's attempted.
Have you ever
Look,
seen any programs? Oh, sorry. Did I interrupt?
I was just going to say that I'm on the Canterbury Energy Committee, and we go back and forth with whether or not we really need a charger in town. We do have interest in getting an electric police car, but at that point, I think we'd just put a charger in the back of the police station that would not be a public charger, that would just be for the police car. And in our public areas, it's difficult to cite because the logical area at the library is taken up by our farmers market and inaccessible at certain times. And I know that that is a real problem for public parking, for public charging. But I think it's worthwhile to support the municipal side, even if it's not public, but at a lower funding arrangement. But if it is going to be a public charger available to people outside of your town, then having a commercial charging situation should be funded at a little higher level than something that might not be public. Or would that even be considered for funding if it was the municipal situation where it would just be the police car using it?
I think we have the opportunity to provide the feedback that there should be funding for non-public charging, but potentially at a different funding level. All of this has kind of got me thinking about whether some of our lower income communities could use like in-kind matches, hours spent working on an application as opposed to needing to come up with 20% of the project cost, something like that.
Interesting. John, you had your hand up?
Just wanted to add one more use case. State parks, and places where people go, which would be hard to get power to probably in many cases. But it's a place where quite a number of people park for long periods of time, and I think the percentage of those people that have EVs might be higher than usual. And if you're winter hiking or doing something like that, you're not getting as good, uh, miles per kilowatt hour. So it would be nice to be able to plug in for 5 hours while you were in the woods and come back and be able to get home without having to stop.
Park and rides are another place where I think there's some prohibition against the state selling things or making things available at park and rides, but that's a perfect place.
Yeah, it's hard to get those kind of projects approved at park and rides, but they do make a lot of sense. We actually find that grocery stores are a really good place for charging, particularly for level two if they are nearby to somewhere like with rental units where people can walk. Those tend to be great because they can use them during the day, use them at night. People who are shopping at the store and are there for an hour or so, get you're not going to get a full charge, but it's enough to be useful while you're shopping. So those we tend to see a lot of usage at those. And they're good spots.
So could the funding level vary? Like if it's commercial, the recipient needs to pay a larger share than if it's for low-income housing, where there's not that expectation. I don't know if there's
Some
any way to tie this into uh, lease opportunities for the EVs, which I know is supposed to be good for, Chuck mentioned low-income people tending to have longer commutes, but possibly not the upfront money for buying a car. And there's all these lease deals, but I guess this is just charging, not ownership.
I had another thought, and sorry for being so crazy sometimes with my comments. Would it be weird or even allowed to ask the public, like if we ran a survey for everyone, literally everyone, that Tesla does this for the supercharger sites, so periodically they'll send out a survey to everybody. Not necessarily if you own a Tesla, but just in general, asking where should we put a level 3 charger? And then it's not like that's going to determine exactly where it's going to go because siting is very important for a level 3 charger. But I think it gives them the data that they're looking for of how many people within a certain area are looking for that type of charging. If we were to ask, and make it popular, just have Facebook ads, Instagram ads, just have as many people posts on it. Of course, there's going to be a lot of negative media on it, a bunch of people that would be against it, but worded properly, I think it'd be an invaluable amount of data to figure out exactly where there are people that already have a need for level 2 chargers, or on the fence about getting level 2, getting cars, getting EVs if there was charging available near them.
I think that's a great idea. Uh, the operationalization of it, though, might be a little bit daunting.
I
But
agree. Yeah.
but I think it's a really interesting idea. What's our time frame, Melissa? If we were going to do some kind of survey, we'd have to spin it up really fast, right? Because yeah.
Yes, these comments are due at the end of January.
Okay. Beth, you had your hand up?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. What were they now? I should have written them down. While we have Chuck, I wonder if he would be willing to be our first survey participant and give us the benefit of his experience with these RFIs and RFPs that he responds to. What what makes a good, uh, reasonable request for an installation?
Reasonable in what sense? Like,
Doable. Certainly, sometimes with the Made in America requirements and things like that, things get expensive fast. What are the things to avoid to keep the opportunity to do as many of these as possible, but to have them in decent locations?
probably spend another hour talking about that. But um, I think it needs to be matched to what you want the use case to be. If you want it to serve multifamily, but you're also saying it has to be um 8 kilowatts per port for level two, that's a mismatch that doesn't make sense and just makes the projects more expensive than they need to be. And that, the expense, and you only have a 40% subsidy or whatever, or a cap, like the things need to align. If you want to target multifamily, you need a pretty high incentive and you need a low power output requirement, or just no power output requirement or something like that. Um, Whereas on the other hand, if you're doing it for lodging, you could probably get by with a lower incentive, because the businesses, like, they're going to get customers to their business by putting that in, and it opens up. There's a financial, it makes sense for them, and they don't need as much of an incentive. Um, if I were designing a program like this, I think that I would try and have different, I'd offer different incentives and different requirements for different markets. And some of the utility make-readies have that, like they'll have a different incentive available if it's going into an apartment versus at a business. And I think that if an RFP were structured like that, it could kind of get through some of these things. I think the problem is that a lot of times they try and make a one size fits all, that's fair, when really what you need is a different incentive for different types of customers. And same thing, like somebody was talking about putting in chargers in a small downtown. That's a harder sell sometimes than it is, like, this summer I went to Rockland, Maine, and they have a number of chargers there, and like I can plug in a lot and spend all day in Rockland, go into shops, and we watched a football game at one of the bars and stuff, and like it's fine to be plugged in all day, but if there's not much to do downtown, you're not going to spend 6 hours in a town waiting for a level two. Um, so I think that that's the most important thing, is like making sure that there are different incentives, based on like how long people are there, how much charge they need, and what the financial incentive is for that particular market.
Okay, so over in the chat, Zeke and I were talking about survey, and of course, great idea. Have a survey that says, you can place up to 3 pins for locations where you'd like to see a level two charger, and then we could ask a bunch of other questions about, you know, do you live in an apartment or do you own a EV now or whatever. But of course, the hard part would be figuring out how to do a survey that lets people put pins on a map as opposed to just answer questions.
Well, and do we want to survey EV users, or do we want to survey places that might potentially apply for the funding?
Good question.
How much information could you get from GreenWave in 1 month?
I have no
They
idea.
ask their customers. Then you wouldn't have to search for people. If they
Right.
go
One
in to ask
possibility
their
that I put in the chat is we could make a survey and then ask Greenway if they have, we wouldn't even need to know who they're sending it to, if they have a way to reach their customers, to ask their customers to answer the survey for us.
The a lot of these RFPs, they don't prescribe specific locations up front. They're just available. So I think you could say like make it available to apartment buildings or make it available to bed and breakfast and hotels. So you're not going to say like it's available to this town versus that town. So like the idea of putting things on a map doesn't really align with how a lot of these are structured. Um, as much as it is like the type of location is usually what matters. Um, so I think that's what I would focus on is like what types of things do you want to incentivize? Workplace charging, multifamily, tourism, all of those kind of different things, municipal for potential municipal fleet charging, things like that. There's a lot of different use cases. Um, it sounds like I don't know that this will be there's still going to be some drafting of the RFP. They're not just going to take the responses to the questions. So that could be the thing to just recommending, what things you think are important. And then it would be up to whoever drafts the RFP to come up with how to do that.
Right. The survey could just be one data point. Yeah. John, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to make another vote for maximizing the use of them as opposed to, an equity consideration, but then maybe have a small portion of them for housing that could be applied for if somebody has an EV and they need a level one at their apartment, if there was a pool of money that could make that happen, as opposed to installing lots of level ones in apartments where maybe there are no EVs. But that would, maybe take care of some equity considerations, but also I think we want to maximize the the money to have chargers used as much as possible because that means more people are benefiting overall, and it's public money, so we should anyway. Thanks.
I mean, shopping centers are great because everyone's got to go shopping at some point. And especially if they charge more quickly, then you can go in and do some shopping and there's some meaningful charges added to your car.
But could I be devil's advocate with that one? Because I've heard that argument before. In the 7 years I've owned EVs, I don't think I would ever stop at a supermarket to charge. Because if you're going to supermarket, right, you're coming from home, and so you very likely have a level two charger at home. So why would you be charging on the go?
Okay. I guess
No, no,
Those
no. It's a
those
very good
people on the
suggestion. A lot of people think that way, so I know it's a common thing to think about, but I think that one I really want to think harder on that one because I don't want I've seen a lot of chargers at certain shopping centers and they're just not used because usually they charge and it's like, well, I can charge cheaper at home and I'm coming from home. I'm not gonna top off my car. That's only a thing you would do if you had a gas car, I think. I
Yeah,
don't
see,
know.
I think you're probably right. I'd have to sit at the co-op, but most of the people charging when I'm noticing, they're out of state. They've
Yeah,
come here to
exactly.
visit, and it's the only opportunity in town.
Right, which is important too, but
Yeah, it's
it's a
great.
different, you're solving for a different thing. It's not a top up. That is less common. Unless you have a hybrid. Beth, I think you mentioned that
Yeah,
hybrids,
I was
yeah,
going to
that's
say
different.
that
Yep.
She's a
when
sipper. That's
I'm
my
a
first time I've heard that term,
I'm a sipper. I love to sip. If I'm traveling, I love to sip. I'm going to be charging at my own house otherwise. But when you have a plug-in hybrid, um, and
Yeah.
I had 20 miles on mine, I would stop at the co-op once they were up and running. I waited for them for a long time, the Monadnock Co-op, and I would sit there. I'd go in and sit and have a sandwich, pick up some sausage, and then go on my merry way. And I'd be 10 miles further on electric, and that was great for me. I just completed a survey asking where you like to charge. I can't remember who it was for. But my number one place to charge is a grocery store because you can get good food. It's not just junk food. and you can sit in your car and eat for a while. I mean, that's more for me for level 3, but if I had a level 2, that's what I would want to do too.
How many people answered your survey, Beth? What
It wasn't a
validity?
survey that I put out. I participated as an answerer.
Oh.
I want to also say for grocery stores that people who live near the grocery stores can level 2 charge at the grocery store overnight, or they could sit their car there during the day, and that is okay. And the one grocery store that I shopping area that I have gone to and tried to charge that has not worked for years is in Bedford, where the Trader Joe's is, the Whole Foods is, the REI is. That charger has, in my mind, never worked, and it should be torn out.
So
Okay.
Melissa has this. Oh, go ahead, Susan.
I was gonna say, if you're charging overnight, then isn't there some way it computes like you've been here too long and now we're gonna start charging you more for,
Yeah,
yeah.
if it's a level 2 and you have a fully electric car, you should be able to, if it's low enough, you would be able to charge overnight. You wouldn't plug in for just a little bit on a level 2 overnight because of those charges that for just sitting and idling. But often overnight the charges go down. The charge for uh the charge goes down. Like the money charge, not the electrical charge.
But the money charge, if you just leave your car there because it's convenient and you don't want to come pick it up right away, you might have a money charge for hogging the spot.
Right. And you would want to, do it at the right time. If you had a fully electric car and you plugged into a level 2, you've got 7 or 8 hours before you're fully charged in many instances.
So Melissa there are a lot of questions we didn't answer. Was this useful for you?
Yeah, it was very useful. And I think if you send this around, we would just want if you can email us thoughts, if your other members of your group can email us their thoughts by the first week of January, some point within the first week of January. I think we're going to try to take this information and develop some remarks for DES.
Okay, so maybe we'll show your documents and just say, a couple sentences, a paragraph, whichever, and we'll forward it to you.
Yep, that would be great.
I'm
Right,
sorry to have one more use case. For people visiting family members who don't have charging at their house, a level 2 charger in town is a godsend. I have a niece who lives within walking distance to her library, and I plug in at her library. We have a lovely meal. This was when I had my plug-in hybrid. We had a lovely meal at her house, visited for 3 or 4 hours, and then I went back and picked up my car and went on my merry way. It was fantastic. So there's another use case for you.
Yeah.
Would that have been sufficient if you had a fully electric vehicle?
Depending on how far I had traveled, yeah, that might be very helpful. It would get me to the next, it might get me to the next level 3 charger, which in New Hampshire could be a ways. I've also plugged in single level at an Airbnb for 2 days, 2 overnights, and I had a full charge when I was done. That's not very useful.
I've done lots of trips in fully electric that are like not, go up the coast for a while. I live in southern Maine, but go up the coast for a while, charge for a few hours while I'm in that town, and it's not enough to get me fully charged, but it's enough to skip a fast charge on the drive home and then finish charging at home when I get back. So I find that way more convenient because instead of having to wait half an hour on my drive, I just let it charge while I'm doing whatever I'm doing on vacation, and then I don't have to charge at all. Like, um, way more convenient. So yeah, basically level 2s are useful anywhere you're away from home or, don't have the option to charge at home. And that's a perfect example, Beth.
I agree. And, if you knew that every town center had a couple level 2 chargers in New Hampshire, it would be a great relief. You would not have to level 3 charge much. And I like cheap electricity, not expensive level 3 electricity.
Yeah.
for day trips and things like that. So, if New Hampshire was known as every town center has a couple level 2 chargers, that would be a
Mhm.
real benefit.
Wouldn't that be a great reputation?
Yeah. In every parking
Well, this
garage.
grant will not get us to every town, that's for sure. The grant. But that does imply that we would want to choose towns where people would want to go to. Don't necessarily have to be out of state people, right? Like I'm in Merrimack, I might want to drive up to Conway, or I might want to, I don't
Mhm.
know, drive up to Sunapee or something like that. Is that what we're thinking?
I mean, where there's things to do in the town center, so it wouldn't be in a deserted town where there's nothing going on. But
It wouldn't be in Canterbury.
Monday night contra dance in Nelson. That's about it. Well, I think this has been really great conversation. I really learned a lot, and I thank you, everybody.
Well, thanks for
Yes, we've
asking.
got,
This is great.
yes, as the meeting moderator, I've done a terrible job. I've had so much fun. We're 15 minutes over. So thank you all for
Thank-
sticking around. This has been really interesting.
And thank you so much for everybody's time and feedback. It's been really
Yeah.
helpful for
Yep.
us.
Thanks.
Hope it
Melissa.
serves the purpose, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.